Welcome to Learning Aloud, a podcast from the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania, produced to inspire purposeful leadership practice and transform organizational experience. I am your host, Stephen G. Hart. My guest today is Diane Hanson. Diane is a distinguished graduate of the Organizational Dynamics program at the University of Pennsylvania. She's had a fascinating career, including being a commissioner town council member in Dewey Beach, Delaware for 10 years, 6 of which she served as the mayor. She's also an award-winning sales manager with a major pharmaceutical firm and has worked as a contract training manager for another. Now a published author, business owner, and keynote speaker, she spends her time speaking, teaching, writing, and managing her consulting practice. Diane has stopped by our studio today to talk about her life and work and to discuss the inspiration behind her latest book, Management Unleashed: Leadership Lessons from My Dog. Welcome to the podcast, Diane.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Diane, I'm fascinated by what you've done throughout your career. Sales manager, consultant, mayor, business owner, and now an author. What's been driving you all these years, and how did you end up where you are now?
Well, I think when it started was when I was a young child, and in the 1950s, aging myself, there were want ads for males and females. Not everyone knows that because that doesn't exist today. But the options for females were nurse, teacher, librarian, housewife, secretary. And they're nice professions, but it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in business. And so from the beginning, probably the age of 12, I was looking for a loophole back into business for women. And what I found was that we had a woman come out from the utility company who was a home economist. And she came out and gave a demonstration for the class and so forth. And I went home and told my mother, that's what I want to do. I see that as a way to get into business for women. And that is what I did. I majored in nutrition. And when I got to school, I spent about 4 years in the field of nutrition. But after a while, I was, like most, especially young people, ready for a change. And at a party, I met someone and was talking to them about, what I was thinking of moving to another career or another job. And, well, what's your background? I told him I majored in nutrition and minor in chemistry. And he said, wow, with that kind of background, they're starting to hire women in the pharmaceutical industry in sales. So that's interesting. That's something I'd never heard of, really. So I applied, and the second job I applied for, I got. And I was the first female they ever hired in pharmaceutical sales. I became a trainer, and then their first female in management. So it was a challenging situation, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Yes. But that's how it all started. And in terms of everything that I've done in my life, I think I'm just a very energetic and ambitious person, and I'm very inquisitive, and so I like to try different things.
Well, that's great. That's great. It's glad you're here today, too.
Yeah.
So I mentioned in my introduction that you are indeed a distinguished graduate of Organizational Dynamics at Penn. So what stands out for you from your experience on the program, and what stuck with you from the program that you still apply today?
Oh, it was a fascinating program for me, because it gave you the chance to talk with peers who've been in business for a long time and in various different roles. So it was exciting to get everybody's opinions. And the professor often would some of my classes anyway, the professor would start off with a question and we'd just go. He hardly said anything the whole class. He just just loved all the interaction. And in fact, one point he said, it's so nice to have a class that knows who Eisenhower is. Meaning not 18-year-olds, I guess. Right. So that's the thing I remember most. And then the entrepreneurial classes that I took were probably the reason that I ended up in my own business. In other words, they gave me the courage to make the big leap, which is tough. I mean, if you're used to a nice paid job and then you suddenly go into consulting and probably don't make a heck of a lot of money for the first 2 years and don't know if it's ever going to really work out, it's a challenge. In fact, at the time that I was resigning to start my own job, my mother was about to have a heart attack. It's like,
Oh, no.
you're giving this job up that has a regular salary, that has a car, that has benefits, that has retirement, and you're leaving, you're quitting. And of course, this is someone from the Depression that just
Right.
couldn't understand this. So it wasn't until my 25th anniversary of my business that she finally admitted it probably was a good idea.
Worked
So
out pretty
25
well for
years.
you.
Yes. So it took a while.
Yeah. So you were a leading sales manager before you made the transition to leadership development coach and consultant. Why did you make that switch, and what inspired you to do it?
Well, I think it was more desperation than inspiration. But I was in this job for 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry, the first female in management, looking to move on or up. And my boss at that time, which was the best boss I ever had, called me in one day and he said, "Diane, I got to tell you, I got promoted. I won't be your boss anymore, you know." So he said, "But there's one thing I want to just let you know between you and me." He said, "As far as I'm concerned, you could be president of this company." He said, "But I got to tell you, they're not ready for a female at the next level. They're just not ready. You're going to have to wait till somebody dies or retires. And I just want you to know that it's not you. It's just the way it is." So now I've got my best boss leaving. I've turned 40, the crisis. And my boss has pretty much told me I'm dead-ended where I am for a while. And then I got my new boss, and he was a freaking idiot.
Oh, no.
And so you combine all that, and it was like, I am so out of here. So I looked through various options. I read the book, What Color's Your Parachute, which is apparently still in print,
Still
probably
out,
very
yes.
different than when I read
I saw it in the bookstore the other day.
And it asks you questions that make you think, what do you really, really want? And the things that I came out with were I wanted more control over my own life and my job. I wanted to be closer to home. I didn't want to be traveling so much and all this. And the answer came out, you need to start your own business.
Wow.
So I thought about it. That's when I had started the Dynamics organization. I was probably halfway through. And that was the other thing. My employer was paying my educational expenses. So it was a tough decision.
Right.
But I ended up resigning and starting the business, and I never regretted it. I just said, I'm going to look forward and not look back.
Well, that's led to the wonderful book that you've written that's called Management Unleashed, Leadership Lessons from My Dog. Now, you wrote this with your co-author, Todd Cameron. I think it was Bogey was the dog, is that right? Was it
Yes.
the dog that sort of... So what did your dog teach you about leadership that inspired you to write this book?
Well, it wasn't just one dog. It was all the dogs I've had my whole life.
Bogey's the one that gets the picture at the back.
Yes, Bogey's the one that's most recent. Unfortunately, he's passed on. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's see. The thing that really did it was when I first became a manager in the pharmaceutical industry. I was about 30 years old and was supervising men that were like 55 and 60. And they looked down their nose and say, well, what can you tell me? I was doing this before you were born,
Right.
you know. And they weren't really receptive to having a female as a boss. So it was quite a challenging situation. And at the same time, I had adopted this sheepdog from the SPCA. And he was a wonderful dog, but just totally unruly. And I came home one day and he had eaten the couch. That is in the book. It is true. That is, some of the things are autobiographical. That was it. It was a blizzard in the house. And at that point then, I talked to some friends. I said, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Everyone said, take the dog back to the SPCA. And my answer was, I can't do that. I'm chairman of the board. They kind of looked down on that sort of thing. So now I got this unruly dog and I got this challenging situation. I went to bed that night, slept on it. When I woke up, I said, I know. I'm going to take him to a private lesson with police dog trainer. So I found a police dog trainer, took him to lessons, and she had to straighten out within the first hour.
Wow.
It was just amazing.
That dramatic.
Yes. What happened was she said, all right, let me see how you interact with the dog. Just make him walk from here to there. And so I went over and pulled the dog's chain. And he looked at me and said, what do you want? He didn't move. We get into this little tug-of-war thing. And she comes over, no uncertain terms do you let that happen, because this is a game. He'll do that all day long. Right. This is fun for him. And she said, you have to let that dog know who's top dog.
Right.
So she said, watch this. So she goes over and pulls that chain, and the dog's like, follows right along. What you want? It's like, okay. So I started being a little more, in charge. And what's interesting is at that moment, what dawned in my mind was this one gentleman who was probably 60 years old, very set in his ways, very negative. And anytime I asked him to do something, it was, well, we tried that years ago and it didn't work, or some kind of negativity. And I'd use my selling skills to convince him he should do this. That's the tug of war. I said, this is a game.
Right.
All right. So the next time I talked to this gentleman, I said, Jack, I need this done. And he said, well, usual routine. Sorry, Jack, we're not talking about the past anymore. We're talking about the future. I need this done, and I need it on my desk by Monday. And there was this long silence. It was one of those pregnant pauses that anyone who talks loses. So I didn't say anything. And then finally he said, well, as long as you put it that way, you have any suggestions how I can do it? It's like, yes!
Wow. Breakthrough.
It was, yes, a real breakthrough. And I realized that he, being older, probably was used more to a dictatorial management style anyway. And I was more into the teamwork and this sort of thing, and he wasn't into that. So I had to change my management style with him to be more dictatorial, and it worked.
Great, so you adjusted. Yeah,
yes.
Wonderful.
So that was one of the first principles of the book, and then over the years I've kept different issues would happen. I think, oh yes, that's
another principle.
Or just training the dogs that I've had over the years.
Well, we'll get into some of the principles a little bit later in the conversation. But the book's interesting because it essentially tells a story in my mind. So the business scenario that serves as the backdrop for the story. Why did you choose this particular setting?
My co-author.
Ah.
All right. Now, I have a co-author.
That's Todd Cameron, right?
Yes, Todd Cameron. He is he's a husband of a very dear friend of mine. And I talked to her one day and I said, I'm really having a problem writing this book because I'm more technical. I'm used to writing pharmaceutical stuff, training, it's bullets, this, that, here's the facts.
PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, exactly, but not fiction, not fun, not, that sort of thing. And I said, I need help getting this into a story. And she says, well, you should talk to Todd. He says, he's great with making up stories. And I thought, well, that's good for a co-author. Maybe not good for a husband, but
yes.
I don't think that's a problem. But
Probably wouldn't be encouraged.
Right, exactly. So we got together, and he was tremendous at trying to weave this in. But he's in the information technology field. And so that's why he used something that he could relate to.
Great. So you identify a total of 8 principles in the book that correlate well with training a dog and with being a good leader. Let's just focus on a few, though, and tell me how they relate to leadership. So you've chosen 4 for us to talk about today. So walk me through the 4 that you've picked from the 8 that actually are in the book.
Okay. Well, the first one is trust. And without that, you cannot have a meaningful relationship. And this I'll go back to the dogs, because my dog died, unfortunately, around the day that the book was published.
Oh.
It was around Thanksgiving last year. Oh. And so we ended up getting a new puppy, which is good. Now, we brought this puppy into the household. He weighed 6 pounds. And we have a Maine Coon cat that weighs 16 pounds. And another cat that weighs maybe 10. So we brought him in, and the cats kind of looked at him. It's like, is that a rat? What is that? But they seemed to immediately understand that this puppy was insecure. He was a rescue. He'd been to 4 different homes before he ended up at our house, and was just scared of everything. Everything. I mean, the first time I tried to give him a treat, he ran away. Then I tried to play ball with him. He ran away and hid. Now, what's interesting, the cat saw this. So then when the dog came out of hiding, the cat got the ball and played hockey with it around the room. Wow. And kind of said, this is what you do with a ball. And within an hour, the dog was playing with the ball.
Interesting.
So what's interesting with this whole thing is, first of all, how you assimilate a new puppy into a household, which is like assimilating a new employee into an organization. And a lot of the impact of how that's going to work depends on your current employees, which in this case were my 2 cats. All right, but the employees, if they feel good about the organization, that they trust their leaders, they feel that they have good benefits or that the company's been fair to them, that will be communicated to that new employee within a matter of a short period of time. By demonstrating how they work together, by their demonstrating their attitude toward the company, the whole thing. And if you have a good relationship with your employees and bring in a new one, it's probably going to work well. But if you've got unhappy employees and bring one in, they may not last.
Yeah.
So that's a matter of trust.
Yeah. I like how you embed that in the very early starting of a new company too. That's when the impression is truly made, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What about one of the other principles?
Well, the other was rewards, and it's interesting, but complimenting your employees or telling them they've done a good job or giving them simple rewards can have so much of an impact and really doesn't have to cost a dime. You know, in some cases, when I was a sales manager, I would bring just little things in, like just, you know, like Valentine's Day, give them all a little piece of candy, or, you know, just give them a baseball for spring season, or, you know, just little things that didn't cost a lot, but they really enjoyed it and they really liked it. But then again, you have to reward specific behavior. In some cases, it was just rewarding everybody because they did a good job.
Right.
But, you know, when someone does a good job, it's important to give that feedback and to be specific about that feedback. And I think that's where we miss it. We often say, you did a great job, but they don't know what was great. And then maybe there was something wasn't so great. You need to get into that as well.
Right.
So you need to say, you did a really good job of doing this, and this. Here's one area you might want to work on. Let's see what we can do on improving that in the future. And people do appreciate the constructive feedback, as long as it's just, you really screwed up. That's not good feedback. But
Right.
if you give them specifics, it helps a lot.
Yeah, I think some leaders are prone to overlook the power of that. The
Yes.
reward giving, right?
Absolutely.
And it does, as you said, it doesn't have to be major league stuff necessarily. Just a little point of recognition or a quiet thank you.
Yeah.
It goes a long, long way.
It really, really does. Well, what's interesting, I had someone read the book and they said, now you've done it. He says, I can't even give my dog a treat without thinking about whether I thanked everybody at work today
Right.
or whether I, you know, told someone they did a good job or whatever.
Well, that's
but
good.
it
Good
shows you how
practice.
it relates. I mean,
Absolutely.
if she thinks that every time she gives a dog a treat,
Yeah.
that's going to make her more effective at the office.
Now, communication is another one that you identify, and you know,
Yes.
clearly that's a critical, important business skill.
It's not just business either. That's the thing that's so wonderful about this book. It relates to parenthood. It relates to husband and wife. It you know, the importance of communication and having clear expectations. And I did stay last night at my co-author's house, and we were talking about their children. And she showed me where she actually has a written contract with her teenagers about their use of cell phones.
Wow,
Isn't that amazing?
that is clever.
So that's an example of
wish
how
I'd
this
thought of that.
applies to other things as well. You know, and we were talking about the one girl wanted to stay upstairs and have her own bedroom, but they wanted it as a guest room. I said, well, what you can do is make arrangements right now and put it in writing just like you did the other contract. She can have that bedroom, but when you have company, she got to move out. She's got to move back with her sister for the night or the weekend. Oh, great idea. You see, so, but if you make your expectations clear up front, it works. It's not like if she let her into the room and say, oh, well, you know, you got to move out this weekend. What do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
but if you have it clear, that's the agreement. You know, you can have this, but here's the condition.
Great.
And so, at any rate, it worked out well. And then the empowerment is another principle. And I think that this sometimes is misused. In other words, people would say, well, you're all empowered to do, you know, whatever, and it's a free-for-all. But you have to have boundaries. It's kind of like the same thing with
Yes.
this contract. And I use it in relation to the dogs, that if you have a puppy or if you have a big unruly dog, you need to keep them on a shorter leash, all right? But if you have a dog that's well-behaved, you can give a much bigger leash. You may even be able to let them run free. Or you've got an invisible fence, but you've got the boundaries.
Right.
Regardless.
Right.
And that's the key to empowerment. You have to say you're empowered to do this, but if it goes beyond certain limits, like if it affects the budget, if it affects another department, you know, then I need to be involved.
Yeah. It's great. So trust, rewards, communication, and empowerment, 4 of the 8 principles that are in the book. Now, in the book, the story is actually told through the eyes of the main character, who is named Marty. She's a young manager learning to lead her team effectively in today's fast-paced and rapidly changing environment. You wrote that Marty is part autobiographical and part fiction. So I'm wondering how much of Marty is really you, and why did you and Todd decide to write the story using a fictional character rather than from a first-person perspective?
We decided to use a fictional character because, first of all, it's more fun. You have a little more
You can
freedom.
be inventive.
Yes, you can be creative and make things fit the story a little bit better. And I think the other thing was my principles were based on my expectations as a manager and a dog lover and owner, and that's really what is about me. I was president of the SPCA. I've had dogs and cats my whole life. Drove my mother crazy till she finally got me a cat. I mean, literally crazy as a kid. I want a cat. I want a cat. And I've just always loved animals for whatever reason. So anyway, I think that having the fictional character makes it more fun, and at the same time, I don't have to reveal everything about my personal life.
Right.
But there are things like I don't play golf at all.
Okay.
My husband plays golf. My husband's not a history professor. But a lot of the stuff in there is true, and the way I would manage things is definitely me.
Right. So certainly based on some of your experiences.
Yes.
But you've given them into the soul of Marty in the book.
Oh, yes. 40 years of experience in management.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I loved about it, too, is it seemed like it gave you a certain creative license as well.
Yes.
To do that. And that certainly comes through in the book in my reading. It was a very fun book to read.
Yeah.
Really loved it.
Yeah.
One of the things I did love about the book more than any other thing else, I had to talk to you about this today, was the points of reflection that you include at the end of the main chapters. You appropriately call them PAWS, P-A-W-S, which I love, for reflection. It gives your readers a chance to think a little more deeply about the principles and how they can apply the learning. I think that's great. So what kind of reaction have you received from your readers and from your audiences as you've been out and about speaking about the book?
Most people find it very unique. I've never seen a book written quite that way. And it is kind of a unique hybrid between a fiction and nonfiction book anyway, so this kind of makes it even more unique. But I've seen actually that people have used it, and I met with one person.
I'm using it.
Yeah, she had every
right
page filled out, and I think it's good that it gets people to really think, how can you use this? How can you take this from a dog scenario and use it effectively in other scenarios, whether it's with your children or your employees or whatever. So, and that's the one thing, is this book is really not necessarily just for people in management or leadership. It's good for anybody. I had a 92-year-old woman read it. She never been in management at all, and she absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's really about a book on life, isn't it?
It
if
is.
you want to manage relationships effectively,
That's right.
this is one way to think about it.
Yeah.
Any kind of relationship, one with your dog or with your boss.
Yes.
Or with your spouse.
Oh, yes.
Anything.
But it's anything but a boring management.
It certainly is, yeah. It was a lot of fun to read.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you leave such an active and entrepreneurial style of life. What's next for you?
That's a good question. Well, I think the next few years will be still promoting the book and doing keynote speaking, and then by then maybe I just want to travel.
Okay.
You never know. Time will tell, or else I'll come up with some other project or write another book or whatever. People have asked me, because I was the mayor of Dewey during a very tumultuous time, and they've asked me why I didn't write a book about Dewey. And my response was, if I did and told the truth, I would either get killed or sued or both.
Oh, boy.
So, I don't know. Maybe I'll take that on. You never know.
Tell-all book about life
Dewey
in
Beach.
Dewey, Delaware Beach.
Yes. I'll tell you, politics are alive and well.
Yes.
It's just amazing. The national politics, local politics are just as bad.
Right.
It's amazing.
Right. Well, I've been speaking today with Diane Hanson. She's an author, keynote speaker, and consultant. Her book, written with Todd Cameron, is titled Management Unleashed: Leadership Lessons from My Dog. Diane, thanks very much for stopping by our studio today.
Quite welcome. Thanks very much for the opportunity.